For more on this, now I want to bring in Democratic Congressman Andy Levin. He represents Michigan's 9th District. Congressman, thanks for joining us. You were in the Capitol Wednesday during the assault. I'm wondering if you can tell us how what you experienced influenced how you feel now about holding the president responsible.
Well, hi, Lana. It's good to see you. I didn't run for Congress till I was 58 years old. And earlier in my life, I tasted a lot of tear gas. I came under gunfire. I saw people killed, sadly, fighting for democracy. In Chengdu in China, I was there on June 4th, 1989. I was in Haiti the first time they tried to have an election for president after the end of the Duvalier dictatorship and other situations. I never imagined that I would see an insurrection against democracy in the temple of democracy, the capital of the United States, and an insurrection fomented by the president himself. What I experienced was first my house building was evacuated, the Cannon building. I went over and spent time in the offices, or sheltered in place, I guess, in the offices of a couple of colleagues there. The second one being my Michigan colleague, Alyssa Slotkin. And then she and I went over to the Capitol right before we resumed operations. And it was just horrifying to see broken glass everywhere. The speaker's lobby, which it's hard to say, the majesty of our Capitol, and it was desecrated. And it felt like a humiliation for our country. And it felt like a violation of all of us. And, the staff, why, there's so many people who work in the Capitol. It's not about the members. It's about the security people, the people who clean it up, the food service people. Their lives were put at risk. They were terrified. It was just a horrible day in the history of our country.
And all of that has led for your support for the articles of impeachment against President Trump. You announced that you will co-sponsor the resolution from Representatives Cicilline, Raskin, and Lieu. Critics, though, Congressman, say that this threatens to fracture an already splintered society. And this comes from some people who still hold President Trump accountable, but feel like impeachment, as you just heard in the earlier piece, say that this is not the way forward. What is your argument for them?
Well, there are a couple things, Lana. First of all, we just started the 117th Congress, right? It goes for 2 years. So the impeachment process can play out over this whole Congress. It's not something that has to happen instantly. And remember, impeachment isn't simply about removing a president or other federal official from office. Its consequence can be that they may not hold office again. And I think in the case of Donald J. Trump, that is very, very important. So there's no need for, should he be removed from office right now? Yes, he should. He's a danger to the country. But even if the Senate doesn't want to go along, we will, I think we need to proceed. The second big point is there's no coming together or healing without accountability. You simply can't sweep something like this under the rug. This is the first time in 209 years since the War of 1812 that the Capitol of the United States was breached like this. And it was breached at the instigation of Donald Trump. He brought his people to Washington. He sent them down there. He is still calling these violent extremists who your video just showed. We're pepper spraying our police. We're hitting them with clubs. We're breaking windows. He's calling them wonderful. I love you. And, this has to stop. And we have to do whatever we can to bring the discourse of our democracy back into the bounds of decency.
So I want to follow up on your first point on that in regards to the timeline for impeachment. President Trump concedes now that he will be out of office on January 20th, with the Senate in recess until January 19th, the day before inauguration. Do you expect that you will that these impeachment proceedings will continue after his term has expired? And is that because of the point you were making about not allowing him to hold office potentially again, as he said in that video, that this was only the beginning, and has talked at length about his desire perhaps to run in the future?
Yes, I think that he must be held accountable no matter the timeline. The House only has control over impeaching the president. People think often that that means removing him, but as you know, impeachment means sort of like an indictment, and then the trial is in the Senate. So we need to proceed with our role, which is in holding him accountable, which is impeachment, and then the Senate will unfold as the senators determine. But I was just pointing out that this can happen throughout the 2 years of the 117th Congress, and I think it's extremely important for us to hold him accountable on whatever timeline. People are talking about the 25th Amendment, and I support using the 25th Amendment. I hope the vice president will step up. I hope the cabinet will step up. It's important for people to realize that Section 4 of the 25th Amendment allows not only the vice president and the cabinet, but the vice president and such other body as Congress may by law provide, that's the text of the Constitution, to invoke the 25th Amendment. To remove the president. So we will also move forward with legislation to set up another body, but obviously that's not going to happen in time to remove him. Practically speaking, the vice president and the cabinet could do that. We should set up another body to deal with this kind of a situation, and we need to proceed with impeachment because I don't think any of the other stuff is going to happen fast enough.
Yes, and as you point out, even if you went that other option, it would still require the vice president to agree. So let's discuss these three options: resignation, impeachment, and the 25th Amendment. Which do you think is actually most appropriate?
Well, I think that the president should resign. He has disgraced his office. He has violated his oath to the Constitution. I don't think he will. I actually think that impeachment is important and appropriate because of the gravity of his violation of the Constitution. He called, and this is included in the article, as you know, he called the Secretary of State of Georgia and told him to throw the election for Trump, for him, and threatened the Secretary of State, a Republican, by the way, of Georgia, with, unspecified threats, like a mob boss, really, more than a president. And then he incited a mob to interrupt the operation of our democracy, to overrun the Capitol of the United States in order to stop the counting of the Electoral College votes, which were overwhelmingly in favor of Joe Biden. Ironically, almost exactly, right, the same number that had gone for Trump in 2016. So, I think
so it sounds like I'm hearing you say that all three are appropriate. It sounds like what you're saying is that you believe that all three are right. I only have a little bit of time left, Congressman, and I do want to get in this other question, because it wasn't merely the president acting alone. There were other supporters. His personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, who said trial by combat immediately before the president told his supporters to march on the Capitol, and several other of your colleagues. And on Twitter, you wrote that, quote, "I hold my colleagues who called for the overthrow of democracy more responsible than those who broke in." What do you think should happen to them?
I feel like obviously a person who storms the Capitol needs to be held to account. But it's very important for your viewers to understand that after the Capitol was desecrated like this, we came back late in the night, and some of my colleagues persisted with the lies about how there was fraud in the election, which 60 court cases found to be completely false. Not a one of those court cases went anywhere. And they continued to try to nullify the votes of millions of Americans. In the end, it was Americans in Arizona and Pennsylvania. That is, in and of itself, an insurrection against democracy. And I think that we ought to censure our colleagues who did that. I mean, it was completely outside the bounds of democracy.
Congressman Andy Levin, thank you for spending your weekend with us. I'm glad that you and your staff and your colleagues are okay. Obviously, we know that 5 people did die in this violent attack, and I appreciate you coming on to explain your rationale for what you think needs to happen next. Thank you.
Thanks, Lana. Take care of yourself.